Western Pennsylvania, 315 million years ago. You step into a forest where the trees tower 130 feet into the air, taller than a 10-story building. The air feels thick, almost heavy in your lungs, and the ground moves beneath your feet because an arthropod, 8 feet long, is crawling past you. Segmented body the width of a dinner plate, 300 legs rippling in synchronized waves. This was Arthropleura, the largest land invertebrate that ever lived, and it wasn't alone. Above you, a dragonfly the size of a hawk circles through the canopy, wingspan 2.5 feet, wider than a bald eagle, compound eyes the size of tennis balls tracking movement below, and in the leaf litter, a scorpion 2 feet long waits in ambush, stinger capable of puncturing chitin armor. But here's what makes this forest truly alien. The oxygen level in the atmosphere wasn't 21% like today. It was 30%, dense enough to see as a shimmer in the air, rich enough to let insects grow to impossible sizes, and toxic enough to kill a modern human in hours. This was the Carboniferous period, and the forests that covered Earth for 60 million years followed rules that no longer exist. Arthropleura measured 8.5 feet long and weighed close to 100 pounds. That's heavier than a full-grown German shepherd, but built like a living segmented tank. The exoskeleton was reinforced chitin, the same material that makes modern crab shells nearly impenetrable, but scaled up to protect a body 15 inches wide. Fossil trackways from New Mexico show Arthropleura traveled in pairs. Parallel grooves carved into ancient mudstone, each track 6 inches wide. And the spacing between segments reveals something disturbing. This wasn't slow movement. Arthropleura could accelerate to 15 miles per hour when threatened. You couldn't outrun an 8-foot millipede moving at jogging speed. The mouthparts were grinding plates designed to process rotting vegetation. But a 2005 study from the University of Manchester analyzed wear patterns on fossil mandibles. They found evidence of protein consumption. Arthropleura wasn't just eating dead plants, it was scavenging, and specimens from Scotland show bite marks on small vertebrate bones, early amphibians crushed between grinding plates that could generate 500 pounds of force per square inch. Talk about evolutionary overkill. But the real nightmare was overhead. Meganeura patrolled the canopy like airborne hunters. Wingspan 2.5 feet, body length 17 inches, compound eyes containing 30,000 individual lenses, 15 times more than modern dragonflies, and flight muscles powerful enough to generate speeds approaching 35 miles per hour. Fossilized gut contents from France revealed Meganeura fed on smaller insects and early vertebrates. The mandibles worked like serrated scissors, cutting, not crushing. And the hunting strategy was pure aerial ambush. Meganeura would perch on high branches, then dive at prey with wings folded. Strike speed calculated from wing structure, 40 miles per hour. You couldn't even see it coming before the mandibles clamped down. The wingspan wasn't just for show. A 2012 study published in Proceedings of the Royal Society analyzed fossil wing structure and calculated lift coefficients. Meganeura could carry prey weighing up to 30% of its body weight while flying. That's a 4-ounce dragonfly carrying a 1.2-ounce amphibian, and it could do it at 30 miles per hour for distances exceeding half a mile. Then there were the ground hunters. Pulmonoscorpius, a scorpion 28 inches long with pedipalps 8 inches across. The claws were reinforced chitin designed to crush exoskeletons, and the stinger measured 3 inches long. Venom composition unknown, but modern scorpions deliver neurotoxins that cause paralysis in seconds. Scale that up to a 2-foot predator hunting early reptiles, and you're looking at a killing machine built for ambush. Fossilized burrows from Scotland show Pulmonoscorpius dug tunnels 3 feet deep. The hunting strategy was simple. Wait beneath leaf litter near water sources. Strike when prey comes within range of the pedipalps. Then drag the victim underground where the venom could work without interruption. You couldn't hide in the undergrowth. Scorpions controlled that territory. You couldn't escape into the canopy. Dragonflies owned the air. And you couldn't move through open ground without encountering millipedes the size of adult humans. But here's what makes it worse. The oxygen. Earth's atmosphere during the Carboniferous period contained 30 to 35% oxygen. That's nearly 50% higher than the 21% we breathe today. And that changes everything about how life works. Insects don't have lungs. They breathe through spiracles, tiny holes in their exoskeleton that connect to a network of tubes called tracheae. Oxygen diffuses directly into tissues. It's efficient, but limiting. The larger the insect, the harder it is for oxygen to reach internal organs. That's why modern insects stay small, except in the Carboniferous. With 30% atmospheric oxygen, diffusion wasn't a problem. Oxygen molecules saturated the air. They penetrated deeper into tissue, and suddenly, insects could grow to sizes that physics normally wouldn't allow. A 2010 study from Arizona State University tested this hypothesis. Researchers raised modern dragonflies in chambers with elevated oxygen levels, 25% instead of 21%. The dragonflies grew 15% larger than normal. Their bodies could support the extra mass because more oxygen reached their flight muscles. Scale that effect up to 30% atmospheric oxygen sustained for millions of years, and you get Meganeura. Talk about atmospheric advantages, but that same oxygen created another problem. For you. Modern humans evolved in 21% oxygen. Our lungs, our blood chemistry, our cellular respiration, all calibrated to that specific concentration. Breathe 30% oxygen for extended periods, and you'd experience oxygen toxicity. The symptoms start within hours. Chest pain, difficulty breathing, fluid building in the lungs, then cellular damage as oxygen-free radicals overwhelm antioxidant defenses. Within 24 hours, you'd be experiencing acute respiratory distress. Within 48 hours, permanent lung damage. You couldn't survive long enough to escape the forest, even if you avoided every predator. And then there's the actual nightmare. Fire. Carboniferous forests were endless fuel. Dead plant matter piled 6 feet deep across the forest floor. Lignin, the compound that makes wood rigid, hadn't evolved bacteria that could decompose it yet. So dead trees just accumulated, and with 30% atmospheric oxygen, fires burned hotter and faster than anything in the modern world. A 2016 study in Nature Geoscience analyzed charcoal deposits from Carboniferous strata. They found evidence of wildfires that burned at temperatures exceeding 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Compare that to modern wildfires that typically reach 1,500 degrees. The extra oxygen meant fires ignited from lightning strikes and spread at velocities approaching 15 miles per hour. You couldn't outrun the flames, you couldn't hide underground, burrows filled with superheated air, and you couldn't breathe through the smoke because your lungs were already compromised by oxygen toxicity. Then, a 2018 study from the University of Birmingham revealed the full extent of how extreme these forests actually were. Researchers led by Dr. Joseph White analyzed fossil plant stomata, the tiny pores plants use for gas exchange. By measuring stomatal density and size, they reconstructed atmospheric conditions with unprecedented accuracy. The findings confirmed oxygen levels peaked at 32 to 35% during the late Carboniferous, around 300 million years ago. But they discovered something else. Carbon dioxide levels were crashing. Photosynthesis from the vast swamp forests was pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere faster than volcanic activity could replace it. Levels dropped to 250 parts per million, lower than pre-industrial Earth at 280 parts per million. The combination was perfect for gigantism in arthropods, but catastrophic for temperature regulation. With less CO2 trapping heat, global temperatures dropped by 8 degrees Fahrenheit over 15 million years. The Carboniferous ended when ice sheets began forming at the poles. A 2020 study published in Science analyzed growth rings in fossilized Arthropleura exoskeletons. The technique revealed these creatures lived 5 to 7 years, far longer than modern millipedes that rarely exceed 2 years. The extended lifespan was directly tied to oxygen availability. More oxygen meant more efficient metabolism. More efficient metabolism meant slower aging. But the real revelation came from trace fossil analysis. Dr. Martin White from the University of Sheffield discovered Arthropleura trackways that terminated abruptly at ancient riverbanks. No signs of predation, no indication of death, just tracks that stopped at the water's edge. The conclusion: Arthropleura couldn't swim. Despite weighing 100 pounds and measuring 8 feet long, these creatures were trapped by geography. Rivers acted as natural barriers. And when climate change began fragmenting habitats, Arthropleura populations became isolated. Then a 2022 study found fossil evidence of fungal infections in Arthropleura remains from Germany. The exoskeleton showed microscopic boreholes, evidence of decomposer fungi penetrating the chitin armor. As oxygen levels began dropping at the end of the Carboniferous, Arthropleura's immune system weakened. The same metabolism that thrived in high oxygen became a liability when conditions changed. For 60 million years, these forests dominated Earth. From modern-day North America through Europe and into Asia, vast swamp systems stretched across the equatorial belt. The coal we burn today, every seam, every deposit, came from these forests. Buried plant matter compressed over millions of years into carbon-rich fuel. The dominance came down to one factor: oxygen. When plants first colonized land 470 million years ago, atmospheric oxygen sat around 15%. But as forests spread and photosynthesis accelerated, oxygen levels climbed. By 350 million years ago, they'd reached 25%. By 300 million years ago, they peaked at 35%. That oxygen enabled an explosion of gigantism. Arthropleura wasn't an anomaly, it was the logical result of unlimited oxygen diffusion. Meganeura wasn't an outlier, it was physics allowing flight muscles to support a 2.5-foot wingspan. Even the trees grew larger. Lepidodendron reached heights of 130 feet with trunks 6 feet in diameter, all powered by atmospheric oxygen that no longer exists. But the same oxygen that enabled gigantism made the forests vulnerable. When tectonic plate movement began forming Pangaea around 300 million years ago, ocean currents shifted, climate patterns changed, and the vast swamps that had sustained high oxygen production began drying out. As forests shrank, oxygen production dropped. As oxygen dropped, giant arthropods lost their metabolic advantage. And as temperatures cooled from reduced CO2, the entire system collapsed. By 299 million years ago, the start of the Permian period, oxygen levels had fallen to 23%. Arthropleura went extinct. Meganeura disappeared. The giant scorpions vanished. Within 10 million years, atmospheric oxygen would drop below 20% for the first time in 100 million years. The forests that remained were different: smaller insects, lower oxygen, and the rise of new predators, early reptiles that would eventually evolve into dinosaurs. The Carboniferous forests didn't lose to competition. They lost to chemistry. When the atmosphere changed, the giants had nowhere to adapt. But for 60 million years, they ruled completely. That's longer than mammals have dominated Earth, longer than dinosaurs controlled the Triassic. An entire era where oxygen made the impossible routine. Carboniferous forests, where millipedes measured 8 feet and dragonflies had wingspans wider than eagles. Where oxygen saturated the air at 35% and fires burned at 1,800 degrees. Where the atmosphere itself made giants. For 60 million years, Earth followed rules that no longer apply. That's the reality of deep time. The normal we know is temporary. And the impossible was once routine.